the AMMACH project.
My name's Dave Starham, and welcome to another presentation from Revelation Tapes. His name is Dean Warwick.
I was taught how to bring down the Twin Towers using nothing but infrasound.
Really?
We were made to study the experiments by the Russians, the Americans, and the British in the late 50s.
In the late 50s?
Late 50s, this was mid-60s when I was in the military, but here were these joint maneuvers being undertaken in the late 50s by these three superpowers then in the Eastern Bloc, bringing down 25-story buildings using nothing but sound wave infrasound.
Good heavens.
We welcome the wonderful Dr. Judy Wood to the AMMACH project On the Road series. This is a highly technical and detailed interview by the AMMACH founder Joanne Summerscales, shot at Northampton University with research colleague Andrew Johnston, just after their appearance at the Breakthrough Energy Conference in Hilversum, Holland. In order to get the very best out of this interview, it is strongly recommended that one gets across three basic items. The first is her book, Where Did the Towers Go? Evidence of Directed Free Energy Technology on 9/11. That's a big title. There's a great deal of information in this book. We're not trying to sell the book. Just get it, read it, and find out what's really going on. The second is our interview with Andrew Johnston, where we introduce this topic in Basis 12. It's called Where Did the Towers Go?
Initially, I found that I believed the official story of 9/11.
I have to say, I did at first, although it didn't feel right.
Right, but it was really by about 2003 that I became a bit more sceptical, having got a broadband internet connection, and I'd started to download several videos and looked at various websites that were springing up at that time. And I then came across a film called 9/11 The Great Illusion, which was made by a Texan called George Humphrey. And one of the central pieces in that video was the analysis of the so-called collapse of the Twin Towers.
Yes.
And by way of an introduction to the subject, my colleague Anne Hess interviewed Dr. Woods at the Breakthrough Energy Conference in Hilversum, recorded only a week or two before this detailed interview with Joanne.
This conference here, you have revealed, and you have been the most the highest aha factor came from you. And what did we see on 9/11 that we didn't see?
Well, people saw, their eyes saw what was there, but their minds didn't because they were told to see something else. And one big problem with the way us humans work is that the first impressions stick. We rely on the first information that's given to us. Another thing is that people keep asking questions until they're given an answer. They don't stop to realize that the answer makes sense.
This is not some promo to buy a book. It's an essential need to know on the use of energy weapons technology by a criminal group against the general population. A criminal and treacherous enemy that exists amongst humanity. A treacherous enemy with humanity and Mother Nature and the very existence of humanity in their sights. As the late Dean Warwick said in the opening titles, such technology was demonstrated to NATO and Warsaw Pact soldiers some 40 years ago. Warwick was to die in questionable circumstances 2 weeks later on a stage at the UK Probe Conference near Blackpool in England. These are high stakes, and it is our collective responsibility to wake up, find out what's going on, and deal with this treacherous enemy within, if we are to survive as a free-thinking people, if at all. Recorded live at Northampton University with thanks to Stuart Pound and his team, we bring you Dr. Judy Wood, Andrew Johnston with AMMACH founder Joanne Summerscales. This is Miles Johnston from the AMMACH project.
Welcome to the AMMACH Field Report. We're here at Northampton University with Dr. Judy Wood and Andrew Johnston. Dr. Judy Wood, of whose work I'm a great fan, wrote a great book called Where Did the Towers Go? And we're going to be exploring that today along with Andrew's book on 9/11. So, Dr. Judy Wood is a former professor of mechanical engineering, and so you may ask, what relevance does this work have to the AMMACH research? Well, through Dr. Wood's extensive, exhaustive forensic research and discovery about what in fact caused the turning of 2 quarter-mile-high buildings into dust in mid-air, certainly looks at a different kind of physics, and that's what we're interested in. And so, as repeated and reported for decades, there have been flying saucers, triangles, cylinders, all kinds of objects seen. There have been beings reported of all kinds and descriptions, and these are clearly using a different kinds of physics. So that is our ground, that is our base, and where we're going to start our talk today, a different kind of physics. So I'd like to welcome now Dr. Judy Wood. Thank you very much for joining us here at Northampton University, and Andrew Johnston. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.
So Andrew, I know just before we talk to Dr. Judy Wood here, we've already done an introduction with you on 9/11. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about that for the audience who haven't spoken or heard you speak before.
So we did the interview with the police intelligence analyst, and in that we covered some of the outline of what Dr. Wood has been researching over the last few years, and how I became familiar and what I discovered in relation to that. And the book that I compiled is called 9/11 Finding the Truth, and that's essentially about how Dr. Wood's research has been covered up, basically.
Yes.
And
yeah.
In a summary of really what we're both involved with, I suppose, Dr. Wood has reverse engineered what happened to the World Trade Center complex,
yes.
in terms of its destruction and kind of how it was destroyed, and I've kind of tried to reverse engineer some large aspects of the cover-up
yes.
of that research,
yeah.
And how they've tried to keep it down and say it isn't that, and these kinds of things. So that's essentially why we're both here, I suppose.
Lovely, thank you for that. And Dr. Wood, welcome again.
Thank you.
Perhaps you could give us just a snapshot, just at this moment in time, about your book, Where Did the Towers Go? Because that is the culmination so far on paper of a lot of research that's available for public consumption, let's say.
Well, it is the only comprehensive forensic investigation that exists in the public domain. I don't know what happens, that is classified, but
yes.
information is not classified. It's the only comprehensive forensic investigation that exists. I looked at what happened, the evidence of what happened.
Yeah.
The towers were there, then they're gone.
Sure.
Where'd they go?
Yeah.
As I say in the title.
Yeah.
And that's the question that, why isn't everyone else asking?
Yes. Yeah. So what was the springboard that set you off on this path of discovery or exploration?
I mean, beginning that day.
Yes. Yeah, indeed.
I was in the
yeah.
faculty conference room looking at these towers unraveling, and it reminded me of War of the Worlds, except now we have a television version instead of a radio version, and I looked at I didn't say anything, but I looked around the room like, you guys aren't buying this. And they looked at me like, what kind of a wacko did we hire?
Did you believe the story at any level?
No, it was like, clearly this did not make sense. This was weird. It was like somebody was playing a trick on us.
Yeah.
But nobody else in the room thought that. And that is a weird, creepy feeling.
I think that's extraordinary also because it's clear, I'm not an engineer or a scientist, but I knew myself right from the word go that something was really wrong, and it's taken your work, I have to say, to really help me put that in focus. So really, thank you for all the years.
Well, thanks. But when I looked at that, when my eyes and ears don't agree, I just turn off my ears.
Right.
I just look. And that kept me from hearing what I was told to see.
Yes.
And the other people in the room apparently were seeing what they were told to see.
Yeah.
And that, I think, was where the difference began.
Yeah.
I kept thinking, well, you know, the grown-ups are going to take care of this. Somebody else's job, not my job. And as things went on, it became clear that the grown-ups weren't going to look into this, weren't going to take care of this. And you begin to think, whose responsibility is this?
Yes.
This is our planet.
Sure.
This is our world. If no one else is looking into it, somebody's got to. So I told my mother I was going to start doing this, and she said, well, if you do that, you won't have a job. And I said, if I don't, nobody will have a job.
Yeah, because the fallout from that, just politically, economically, and on personal freedoms, is massive. I mean, Andrew, you probably have documented that quite a lot, or certainly spoken about that quite a lot as well, from the Homeland Security or the Patriot Act and God knows whatever else, and England's followed suit, and Canada, and to some degree Australia, and our personal freedoms because of that, and because of this ridiculous, you know, the war on terror mantra has become, you know, the reason or raison d'etre.
Well, without looking at even the political ramifications, as an engineer, you're interested in the truth. And that may be different than other professions, as Andrew and I have talked about.
Yeah.
That,
we both have an attitude of trying to solve the problem. We adopt a problem solver's approach, and I think one of the things you're going to bring up later in the talk is the problem solving skills, which seem to have been lost to a large proportion of the population.
But with engineering, you know, as I tell my students, if the bridge is down, it's down. You can't argue it back up.
That's right.
You start pointing fingers as to whose fault it is it's down, but it's down.
Yes.
And a lot of professions, you can sort of argue it back up. So
Sure.
let's look at the facts of what happened. You know, that's how I approached it. But also, if what happened is not being addressed by anyone, what kind of a world do we have?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
you want it based on reality. And it felt like I was in the twilight zone.
Yes, and coming forward to the NIST report, which is the National Institute for Standards and Technology, I think it's and technology, isn't it? Which was, I can't remember what the funding costs were for that. It was enormous, wasn't it?
There's more of what it was about.
Yes.
And there was a wonderful lawyer I met who figured out a way to get at the problem. He had seen my website and saw real evidence that could be admissible in court.
Right.
There was an avenue was a whistleblower case, but I needed to be a whistleblower.
Aha.
So I wrote a request for corrections to NIST as a whistleblower, telling them what was wrong, that the contract, you can't sue the government, but you can sue the contractors for fraud.
Right.
The contractors were helping essentially to cover up what happened.
I was going to say, just for clarification for those people who don't know what NIST is, but Andrew, perhaps you've done quite a bit of research on that. And
well, I mean,
the companies that they brought in as well.
My understanding to relate it,
contractors.
right. I mean, to relate it for a UK audience primarily is that the Department of Trade and Industry is somewhat like NIST.
Right.
So NIST is like the American equivalent of Department of Trade and Industry. And they were given a mandate by Congress to produce a technical investigation into how the towers were destroyed. Obviously, we had the 2003 9/11 Commission report, which was kind of, what agencies failed in their procedures, and who did, where were those failures, and so on, and supposed security failures. That was in the 2003 report, which they didn't want to do, and then later they had to produce technical reports, which ended up being 10,000 pages long.
That's right.
And they came, was it August 2005 or September? September 2005, wasn't it? They came out, and I think that the cost was something like $16 million or $13 million, millions of dollars basically.
Unbelievable.
And it was supposed to be, like the done deal on what happened to the World Trade Center towers, or the two towers primarily.
Yes, because they didn't.
They weren't tasked with investigating the other buildings, which I'm sure Dr. Wood will discuss later.
Yes.
Because it wasn't just the two towers that were destroyed. The whole thing went. And so, that in of itself is something that people need to look at. And I kind of, what I've said in a couple of the talks I've, done is the NIST report cost, millions of dollars and was a dishonest investigation. If you want an honest investigation, you can have one for $40.
Yes.
So I do hope that the US government, and indeed anybody, would agree with me when I say that's pretty good value for money.
Absolutely. Fantastic.